It's funny how we walk through our days acting as if we've all silently agreed to pretend that everything around us makes perfect sense. We wake up, rush through routines we never question, and step into a world that keeps handing us instructions with the kind of confidence you'd expect from someone who actually knows what they're doing. And most of the time, we just nod and go along with it. We follow the script, play the role, smile on cue, and hope no one notices that half of what we do is not rooted in purpose, meaning, or even logic. It's rooted in habit pressure and the fear of looking like the one person who didn't get the memo. But the secret is, there is no memo. There never was. We've normalized so many absurd behaviors that if we paused long enough to really see them, we'd laugh first and then probably cry. Like the way we apologize for things that don't require an apology. Someone bumps into us and we say, sorry. We shrink ourselves because it's easier than taking up the space we actually own. Or those moments when we pretend we're fine, even though our face, our energy, and our entire posture are screaming anything but fine. We've crafted a culture where the truth is uncomfortable, but pretending is polite. And we choose polite even if it quietly wears us down. Think about how often we celebrate being busy, as if running ourselves into the ground is some kind of achievement. We talk about being exhausted like it's a badge of honor, something to be proud of. But deep down, we know it's a coping mechanism. Constant motion keeps us from confronting whatever we don't want to face. We use noise to drown out the questions, the doubts, the deeper truths that we don't want to sit with. And then we wonder why we feel disconnected, why we feel overwhelmed, why we feel like we're drifting instead of living with intention. Maybe it's because the world rewards the drift. The world loves when we move automatically. It makes everything predictable and easy to manage. We even normalize pretending to know things we don't actually understand. We nod along in conversations, throw in vague phrases, and hope no one asks a follow-up question. Because the fear of looking uninformed is somehow greater than the value of authentic curiosity. We've convinced ourselves that I don't know is embarrassing, when in reality, it's one of the most liberating things we can say. It's human. It's honest. But honesty is hard because honesty makes us visible, and visibility makes us vulnerable. So instead, we hide behind the comfort of performance. And then there's the pressure to keep up with everything and everyone. Trends, expectations, opinions, aesthetics, labels. We keep adjusting ourselves to fit molds that weren't made with our names on them. We measure our worth by metrics that have nothing to do with who we are and everything to do with who we're trying to impress. We've built a life where being ourselves feels like a risk, and being a curated version feels safe. But the curated version comes at a cost We lose the messy, beautiful, imperfect human part of ourselves that actually connects us to others. The absurdity becomes even clearer when we realize how far we'll go just to avoid discomfort. We avoid difficult conversations, avoid asking for help, avoid saying no, avoid setting boundaries, avoid being seen as too much or not enough. We smooth out the rough edges of our truth so we won't upset anyone, even if it means betraying ourselves. And then we feel the quiet resentment build, not because others have asked too much, but because we've offered too much without asking what it was costing us. And yet, beneath all this noise, there is a part of us that knows things don't have to be this way. A part of us that recognizes the absurdity, that laughs at it, that sees through it. A part that wants permission to stop pretending long enough to breathe, long enough to question, long enough to choose something that feels real instead of something that simply looks acceptable. The absurdity around us isn't the enemy. The silence around it is. When we start calling it out, when we start naming it, when we start laughing at it, we loosen its grip. We stop being puppets of habit and become authors of our own experience. Because the moment we stop pretending everything is normal is the moment we start actually living. It's strange how easily we fall in love with the stories we tell ourselves, even when we know deep down they're not the whole truth. There's something comforting about a polished version of reality, something easier about wrapping our fears in softer language and pretending the sharp edges don't exist. We create these narratives so we can feel in control, so we don't have to face the parts of life that feel unpredictable or uncomfortable. And somewhere along the way, we start believing the illusions more than we believe our own instincts. We cling to them, protect them, defend them, because the truth demands something from us, and illusions simply ask us to look the other way. We tell lies like they're tiny, harmless things. We tell ourselves we're okay, that we're not hurt, that we're not afraid, that we can handle everything alone. And every time we repeat those little stories, we drift a little further from what's actually going on inside us. We convince ourselves that vulnerability is weakness, that asking for help is failure, that slowing down is laziness. We keep polishing our image, tightening our armor, performing our confidence. We would rather appear strong than feel seen. And the cost of that performance is a kind of quiet loneliness we don't talk about. And it's not just the lies we tell ourselves. It's the ones we accept from the world around us. We live in a culture that's addicted to pretending. We pretend success looks like perfection, even though perfection isn't real. We pretend happiness is something we can buy, chase, or curate. We pretend that more followers, more validation, more approval will fill the spaces inside us that have nothing to do with numbers. We pretend productivity is the same thing as worth. We pretend that having all the answers is more valuable than asking better questions. Somewhere along the line, we started worshiping confidence that isn't grounded in truth. We reward certainty even when it's empty. We applaud the people who speak the loudest even when they're not saying anything meaningful. We trust the slogans, the inspirational quotes, the shiny promises, the filtered versions of reality. And as long as everything looks polished, no one asks too many questions. But the moment you scratch the surface, you see how much fear is hiding underneath. Fear of not belonging. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of being judged for being human instead of impressive. And then there's the way we let other people's illusions shape our behavior. We shrink ourselves because we don't want to disappoint anyone. We pretend to agree to avoid conflict. We nod along with ideas that don't sit right with us because the discomfort of honesty feels too risky. We let expectations define us, even when they don't align with who we are. We choose the comfortable lie over the rattling truth. And we do it so often that we forget what it feels like to stand rooted in our own clarity. But the truth has a way of waiting for us. It sits quietly, patiently, until we're ready to pick it up. It doesn't punish us for avoiding it. It doesn't shame us for taking the scenic route. It simply keeps whispering that there is a better, freer way to live. A way that's less about performing and more about being. A way that values presence over perfection. A way that makes space for mistakes, softness, uncertainty, and second chances. A way that honors the messy, complicated, magnificent reality of being human. When we let go of the illusions, just long enough to breathe, we start noticing things we've been ignoring. We see what truly matters, not what we've been told should matter. We feel the difference between what looks good and what feels right. We recognize the cost of pretending and the relief that comes from admitting we don't have it all figured out. And slowly, the truth becomes less intimidating and more liberating. Because truth doesn't require us to be perfect. It just requires us to be honest. So maybe the point isn't to dismantle every illusion overnight. Maybe it's simply to pause, notice, and tell the truth when it matters most. Because the moment we speak truth, real truth, we give everyone around us permission to do the same. There comes a moment when you realize that most of the noise around you isn't actually yours. It's a collection of expectations, unspoken rules, half-truths, and pressures that you didn't ask for but somehow learned to carry. We take on so many voices that don't belong to us, voices that tell us how to think, who to be, what to want, and how to measure our worth. And without noticing, we start moving through the world, guided by those voices instead of our own quiet knowing. The challenge isn't that we can't hear ourselves. It's that we've forgotten what our own voice even sounds like underneath all the noise. We've become experts at absorbing everything around us. We take in every criticism, every judgment, every standard, every opinion. We internalize the belief that we need to keep up, fit in, stand out, impress, or prove something. And the more we try to meet all those external demands, the more disconnected we become from our own truth. We start living reactively instead of intentionally responding to the world's chaos, rather than choosing our own direction. It's no wonder so many people feel exhausted, carrying the weight of a life built on expectations instead of authenticity is heavy in a way that no amount of rest seems to fix. But there's something powerful that happens when we step back and start paying attention. When we give ourselves even a moment of stillness, the world's noise fades just enough for clarity to emerge. And clarity has a way of revealing what's unnecessary, what's outdated, what's rooted in fear instead of purpose. It shows us the habits we've outgrown, the relationships that drain us, the standards that don't reflect who we are, and the assumptions we've accepted without ever questioning. It gives us the courage to ask better questions, to choose better boundaries, to walk away from the constant chase of approval, and to reclaim the parts of ourselves we've silenced for far too long. Reclaiming your mind doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It's not about grand declarations or sudden reinventions. It's quieter than that, more intimate. It starts with noticing that you don't have to agree to every request or absorb every emotion that passes by you. It begins when you realize that slowing down isn't laziness, it's wisdom. It begins when you recognize that saying no isn't rejection, it's self-respect. It begins when you understand that you don't need permission to choose a life that feels true to you. And once you taste that kind of freedom, even just a little, you will never forget how empowering it feels. There's something deeply human about wanting to belong. But belonging doesn't require abandoning ourselves in the process. The irony is that the more we try to fit into someone else's idea of who we should be, the more isolated we feel. But the moment we allow ourselves to show up honestly, with our quirks, fears, hopes, imperfections, and truths, we create the possibility of real connection. People may not always understand it, but the ones who matter will notice. They'll recognize the courage it takes to show up as yourself. They'll appreciate the openness, the sincerity, the clarity you bring into the room. That is the kind of belonging that nourishes instead of drains. And yes, choosing authenticity in a world that rewards conformity can feel risky. But it's also the path that leads to a deeper sense of peace. When you stop performing and start being, you stop negotiating your worth based on external measurements. You stop chasing the next validation. You stop living in reaction to other people's expectations. Instead, you anchor yourself in your own values, your own truth, your own intentions. And from that place, everything becomes clearer. What to hold on to, what to let go of, what to pursue, and what to release. Reclaiming your mind is not about becoming invincible. It's about becoming grounded. It's about knowing where you stand even when the world feels chaotic. It's about trusting that your intuition is wiser than the noise around you. It's about choosing presence over performance, truth over illusion, and alignment over approval. It's about honoring the simple, powerful fact that your life is allowed to feel like yours. Because the moment you stop letting the noise guide you is the moment you start living from a place that's real.